ومن أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين.
Even if you're convinced it's haram, is there enough scholarship? When I spoke to the Hanafi Ullama, they were like, we have no issue with it. We have no issue with it. I went to traditional South Asian Hanafi Ulama in private gatherings, no issues. They won't say it in public. Privately, they said no issues.
Now, this is really disturbing. First thing, you won't mention who these ulama are. Secondly, you will say that these ulama themselves will not say this in public. So why are you mentioning this in public? If this is something private between you and them, then keep it private. And if they're ashamed to say this publicly, then there's something wrong. And just to say I've met Hanafi ulama or Shafi'i ulama or Maliki ulama doesn't tell us anything. The madhab is not just a particular scholar's opinion. Regarding this issue, there are ulama who have written entire works to say there is ijma', there is consensus that music is haram. Now, you could argue that point, that there is an ijma' and so on, but that's not even what I'm discussing here. When you talk about the madhahib, you have to reference the books of that madhab and the mu'tamad, the relied upon books of the madhab. Now, if you're going to say the Hanafi madhab and Shafi'i and Maliki and so on allow music, they don't say this is haram, then give us a reference from a book or name a scholar. You can't just say I met somebody somewhere and they won't even mention who they are and they won't mention it publicly and then quote it. Here, I'm going to show you. This is from Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the great Khalifa, the pious man who led the Ummah without a doubt. In his time, when some of the people started to allow music, what did he say? He said, you're openly allowing musical instruments and wind instruments is an innovation in Islam. He said, this is something that was never done before. And he criticized the people and condemned them for such a thing. From that early on, the Hanafi scholar Abu Layth as-Samarqandi, in more than one place, he says that the proofs, and I've scanned them, they're on your screen right there, the proofs of prohibition music, listening to singing, dancing, and all of that is from the kitab, from the Quran and the Sunnah, wal ijma' al-ummah. What does the great Hanafi scholar here say? That according to the consensus of the Muslim ummah, this is haram. The great Maliki scholar Ibn Abdul Barr, in his ilm wa fadlihi, he mentioned that the study of music, entertainment is rejected and discarded according to all of the adherents of all of the divine religions based upon knowledge and faith. Not only of this ummah, al-adyan, all of the different faiths. If you go to the true followers of those faiths, according to Ibn Abdul Barr al-Maliki, he says this is something that has been forbidden. Now, we'll continue. The great Shafi'i scholar Al-Baghawi, in his Sharh al-Sunnah, in his amazing work, he says scholars of Islam have come to an agreement of prohibition of wind instruments, instruments of entertainment, musical instruments, stringed instruments, that there is an agreement of the scholars of Islam that this is haram. Now, Ibn Hajar al-Haythami, not to be confused with Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, Ibn Hajar al-Haythami, the Shafi'i faqih, the one that we go back to know the last verdicts in the Shafi'i madhab, he also says that by the consensus of the ummah, this is haram, as you can see. Now, the greatest scholars of the Hanbali madhab, the famous scholar Ibn Qudama, Muwaffaquddin Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi al-Hanbali, the one who wrote al-Mughni, in al-Mughni, right there on your screen, he shows that there is an agreement of this ummah that this is haram. I'm not just saying I met a scholar and I met him and he won't mention his name. That I'm giving you scans for each one from all the madahib. This is from Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. In his explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari, he also says that by the consensus, ijma' of this ummah, listening to musical instruments is haram. By the ijma' of this ummah. Now, when we go to Al-Qurtubi, the great scholar of tafsir, he has Jami' al-Ahkam al-Quran, Al-Qurtubi, what does he say? He goes, with regards to flutes, stringed instruments, drums, there is no difference of scholarly opinion that it is haram to listen to them. These are scholars that are showing ijma' of this ummah. Now, what about the four madahib from the ai themselves? In Ruh al-Ma'ani, Al-Ulusi, the great scholar of tafsir, he talks about Abu Hanifa, and he is a Hanafi scholar himself. He said Abu Hanifa forbids listening to musical instruments, all types of trombones, drums, even the striking of sticks to make a musical sound. Abu Hanifa prohibited it. So don't tell me the Hanafis are fine with it. Abu Hanifa wasn't fine with it, and his madhab is not fine with it. Right? Now, Ibn al-Qayyim, in fact, he goes on, he wrote a whole book on this issue. He says the madhab Abu Hanifa is the strictest in regards to this, and he comments that they are amongst the harshest, and his companions clearly stated that it is haram to listen to all musical instruments such as the flute, the drum, the tapping of a stick. They stated that it is a sin, which implies that the person is a fasiq, is a sinner or open sinner whose testimony should be rejected. And they went further than that, and they said that listening to music is fisq, is sinful, and enjoying it is kufr. This is a Hanafi madhab. I'm not saying that I take this opinion, but just to let you know that this is how strict the Hanafi madhab was on this issue that you're making light of today. Imam Shafi'i, in his own which his students collected, what does he say? He says music's haram. Imam Shafi'i. If you look at the Maliki opinion, as Ibn Abdul Barr has mentioned already, and the Hanbali opinion, which has been mentioned, as Ibn Jawzi, he mentioned that Imam Ahmad considered all music to be haram, except whatever there is an exception for, and we'll discuss that inshallah. But here, to summarize, I want to bring to you the work of Shaykh al-Islam Taqiyuddin Ibn Taymiyyah, Abu al-Abbas, one of the great scholars, well known as Shaykh al-Islam, in his Majmu' al-Fatawa. What does he say? He says the madahib al-arba, all four of the madahib, they agree that music is haram. All four of the madahib. Right? So, from the contemporary scholars like Shaykh Abdulaziz ibn Baz, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, Shaykh Albani, so on, they will also find these clear verdicts that music's haram. Some people might say, well, there is a scholar that took another opinion. Ibn Hazm took another opinion, or this scholar took another opinion. And that may be. Just because a scholar held an opinion doesn't mean that it's okay for you to follow it. There is a beautiful statement from one of the great four Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He said, if you took from the concession of every scholar or from the mistake of every scholar, you would gather together every source of evil. And I have this statement on your screen. What does that mean? We don't just say, oh, a particular scholar said it's okay, so it must be okay. No, we look at the evidences. The Quran clearly, as the Sahaba have explained, show music is haram. Sahih ahadith in the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari that have been checked by Ibn Hajar and others clearly show music is haram. Many of the Sahaba have clear statements, as Ibn al-Qayyim has mentioned, that music, it grows hypocrisy in the heart. Having known all this, you can't just say, well, there is ikhtilaf on the issue. There is such a great scholarly consensus on this that you could even make an argument for ijma'. Now, I'm going to mention a couple of things where people make a kind of shubha, a doubt, to try to get away from this. They say, well, there is a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sitting and little girls were playing the daf and he allowed it, so that means music's halal. No. We always have an am, a general rule, and a khas, a particular exception. For example, dhuhr is prayed 4. But if you're traveling, you pray it 2. But that's an exception to the rule for traveling, not for all times. You can't be sitting at home praying 2, saying, well, there's a hadith of Rasulullah prayed 2. Well, you have to look at the situation. This hadith, as reported in Al-Bukhari, from Aisha radiyallahu anha, mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came and he sat down, and there were little girls that were playing the daf, talking about one of the battles of Islam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned his head. Abu Bakr radiyallahu anh, he got upset. What did he say? He said the instruments of shaitan in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Notice the first thing, the Sahaba understood musical instruments are instruments of shaitan. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he turned to him, he said, let them be, it's the day of Eid. He didn't say, no, they're not the instruments of shaitan. He didn't say they're halal. He just said, for this day, for these girls, let them play. So what does that mean? That the general rule is that these are instruments of shaitan that are haram. The exception to that rule is for the day of Eid, or as another hadith will mention about weddings and things, for girls to play the daf, only the daf, not guitars and all that, would be permissible. That's an exception that is there in hadith, and we accept that, as Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal said as well. And this is supported by the hadith that Ibn Majah and At-Tirmidhi have mentioned from a reliable chain, where he says the difference between halal and haram, meaning talking about the weddings, is the one that is with the daf and sound, meaning that if you play the daf with the sound to announce the wedding, this is halal for that situation, not for all situations. So understanding this, when we look at from the earliest scholars, from the Sahaba and Tabi'un onwards, musical instruments in general are haram, no doubt to that. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? Yes. At times like Eid or weddings, if little girls sit and play the daf for a little enjoyment, there is nothing wrong with that. But you can't translate that to mean that you're going to go throw on Metallica and throw on NWA and throw on these things and just listen to them and call it halal. No, you don't play with the religion. Now, there is another doubt people put forward. They say, well, music's everywhere. What do we got to do? Put corks in our ears when we're walking through a mall? No, there's a difference between hearing something that you don't intend to hear and something that you attentively go and listen to, right? Meaning that if you're going to go for a job interview and you're sitting in the lobby and there's music playing, you didn't go for that intention. And if you have no power to turn it off, then you are not held responsible for that which is out of your control. That's just something in the passing. And it being everywhere doesn't make it halal. Gossiping is everywhere. Lying is everywhere. Women dressed inappropriately is everywhere. Any mall you go to go buy clothes or any shopping center you go to buy milk, you're going to have women that are not dressed appropriately and men that are not dressed appropriately. Does that mean that it's halal? No. You don't make that excuse. You do your best. If you go somewhere and there's a poster of a woman or a man not dressed appropriately and you happen to see it because you walk in the store, that's not a sin on you. You look away. But that's different from you going and searching up a website and watching videos or something. Don't equate the two. The same with music. You go to a mall and there's music playing in the background. You go shop, do what you got to do, get out. That's not your sin. But if you go and you go to Spotify or whatever, Apple Music or YouTube Music, and you start listening to songs, that's different. Now, the next shubha that I will deal with. A lot of people do listen to music. That is true. And that doesn't make you kafir. Like, we're not saying that this is an issue of kufr. But don't call it halal. If you have a personal weakness, sometimes maybe you're feeling down and you throw some blues on or, whatever. That's between you and Allah. People sin, they make mistakes. Make tawbah to Allah. Hopefully between salawat and the good deeds that you do will erase these bad deeds. But don't halalify it. Don't try to change the deen of Allah. Don't try to take away from the Quran. Don't weaken ahadith in al-Bukhari. This is important. We all have sins and mistakes. But to justify haram and call it halal, that's a line you shouldn't cross.
أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين.